Yeah, we're live. And I'm already out of focus. Let's see. And use my hand trick, see if it's going to work. Much better. Thought maybe it was just me. Good morning to everybody. What's going on? It is 7:40 here, and we're getting a little bit of a late start, but we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. One is when I head down to West Tech, which should be fairly soon, I'm going to make sure that I get the 2.2 liter Dodge motor back together. As you know, we had a few problems with it. One, they had there was a leak, actually a leak. There was a erosion from a water passage all the way over to the combustion chamber, so that had to be welded up and fixed. There was a broken head bolt. There was valves leaking. There's all sorts of issues with it. So we took it apart and did machine work so that we could put it back together, basically just kind of in stock form. And as you know, that is a T1. It's an 84, so it's an early non-computer controlled boost motor. It just had basically a wastegate, a manually controlled wastegate. We're going to be doing that on the dyno anyway, so we'll control it with a bleed valve, or we could hook up the electronic controller. But I need to get that thing back together. Right now, I think it might just be a short block. Whatever it is, when I pick all of the parts up from the guys at L&R, pick that up from the machine shop. Now I can put it back together. Obviously, I've already built one, so it should be no problem just to put together another one. I'm excited about running it in the configuration that it's in, which is a draw through turbo. So I'm excited about doing that and measuring some restriction between the turbo and the throttle body, trying bigger throttle bodies on there, obviously putting an intercooler on the non-intercooled version, and then doing all sorts of stuff, the different intake manifolds and all that stuff. So that will be very, very cool. And then when I bring the heads down, I have both the slider cam and the roller cam. We're going to airflow test those, and then we can get some preliminary flow data on those before Brian from the car farm does another set of heads, and we can test those. So it'll be very, very cool. I'm excited about that. And I'm also excited about running it with the Holly and running it essentially with an LS harness. Thanks to Ish. Shout out to Ish down there at West Tech. We made I actually made the mount and everything for the trigger wheel, but he initially just held up the trigger wheel or the crank trigger for the LS, and we just spun the distributor, hooked up the wiring stuff to make sure that the trigger would work, and it does. And so I just made a mount. We drilled a hole in the distributor, made a mount so that we could mount the crank sensor to the trigger wheel on the factory distributor, and it seems to work fine. We started it up on the stand, even though the motor was not running fantastic. It was running, and so we know that that part of it at least works. So that will be good. That way I can control and tune the air, fuel, and the timing, and make sure that it does everything that it's supposed to do. So that will be very, very cool. I'm excited. I love testing force induction stuff, and I want to do stuff on the little 2.2. I think part of the big problem with that thing is that people have not had the proper tuning on it. Obviously, there are guys that are doing that, but for a lot of its life, it was just kind of an unknown. Guys would put bigger injectors in it. They would turn the boost up. They would try different computers, and the computers that they were trying, they didn't know how much timing they were getting, and so it was a whole big thing. So it'll be interesting to eliminate that as part of the equation, and to be able to tell them, hey, look, it does this at 15 degrees, and it does this at 19 degrees or 20 degrees or 23 degrees or whatever the number is, and to also run it naturally aspirated, because I have a header for it. We can run it obviously with any of the intake manifolds naturally aspirated. That will be very easy. So I'm excited about that. So that's the 2.2 project. That's one of the ones that I want to get done, get it running. And it always gets put off, like with the 4200 Atlas. It's all apart, and that's why it hasn't been run again. It's because it's going to take time to get it all back together. But you just have to get over that obstacle, and that's one of the obstacles on the 2.2, and the 4200 I want to get done kind of next. So that'll be cool. Today I actually want to talk about and this will be the poll for today after I describe this. So the Trail 90, I want more power from the Trail 90. So here are my two options, the two options that I've been kicking around and sketching out. One is on the Trail 90, and I only need about another 1.5 horsepower or so. 2 horsepower would be fantastic, but even 1 horsepower would be great because it only makes 7. So even at 1 horsepower, you're talking about a 15% improvement, which would be a 15% gain in power would be a noticeable amount on that thing, especially if we've got an equal amount of torque. So here are my 2 options. One, I've been kicking around the idea of doing a hybrid. So using an electric motor, like a 1 horsepower electric motor, is certainly possible, and hook it up to a chain drive and just engage that. I only need it when I'm going up hills and stuff. It's not going to be on all the time. So it would be cool just to be able to have a push to pass electric motor assist, basically, that would add power to the drivetrain on this thing. And that would be kind of cool. Plus, it'd be all, eco-friendly and stuff. That's not part of this, but it would work. The downside to that is that this is only a 6-volt battery system, so it'd have to be a 6-volt motor, and then mounting it and the weight, and there are other things obviously associated with this, and then how long can it last? How much juice is in that battery? How much power can I actually make? All of those things would have to be considered and tested and evaluated and see whether or not that's going to work. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is obviously to add boost. So I'm thinking, and I can use the electric smog pump, which Mark Sanchez has already. He's going to let me try it. The electric pump would be easy. Again, it's going to have to run that electric smog pump is a 12-volt system, so we have a 6-volt, so we're going to have to overcome that part of it. But the bigger thing to overcome is with this pump is we have to provide boost to this motor. So we have to do it in one of 2 ways. Either we have to blow through the existing carburetor, and the problems that we have to overcome with that, one is that this is a gravity feed carburetor. It's not pressurized fuel. So if we're trying to blow through the carburetor, obviously a gravity feed fuel system is not going to work. You'll get no fuel flow if we put pressure through the carburetor. We could pressurize the fuel tank or pressurize a secondary fuel tank using the supercharger, but the problem with that is we're still going to have a net zero amount of fuel flow because we're going to have the same pressure in the carburetor as we would in the fuel system, and so we still will have no fuel flow. The way to cure that is to run an electric fuel pump feeding the carburetor more fuel pressure than we have boost pressure, and that's not an insurmountable thing. That's a pump and a regulator and a fairly unsophisticated pump at that. It doesn't have to be anything, because the amount of fuel that we're talking about and the fuel line size and all that, that's a fairly small pump, and it should be fairly easy to do, so that we could get, if we have 2 or 3 pounds of boost, whatever that electric smog pump could possibly make on there. We're not looking at making a huge amount of power. I just need a little bit. And the cool thing is, if that's electric, again, it could be a push to pass kind of thing. So it won't be engaged all the time. The other consideration is, are we going to blow through that carburetor, or could we use a bigger carburetor then to draw through with the electric pump, and will it be sealed and not light itself on fire if we have to try to draw fuel through it? All of those things are things that we would consider. So the poll for today will be, is boost a better idea than hybrid drive? So is boost a better idea than the hybrid drive? Caterpillar drive, Trail 90 hunt for Red October. Is boost a better idea than hybrid drive for the Trail 90 power adder? So we'll see what people think about that. which one we like. My camera keeps freaking out. It's probably because it's like too early in the morning for it. So we'll see what you guys have going on. See what you guys have to say about the 10 horsepower Trail 90. The other option, obviously, is I could take the head off and port the head. And I'm pretty sure, I know I could do a good enough job porting it to make it flow better. The thing is, would I get the gain? And then the other part of all of this equation is the hybrid drive would make itself easy because we don't have to worry about air fuel mixture doing that. But on boost, we also have to consider, okay, how do I make sure that how do I test what the air fuel is now? How do I make sure that I get the right the right air fuel under our boost? And then also, what about timing? So those are all considerations, even though we're not going to run, very much of a power game. 7/8 Bach-10 wrench holds an LS crank sensor and makes a very straight crank mount. You make work what you have to make work, and it's amazing what the ideas that people come up with out there. That's pretty cool. Your videos are single-handedly giving you all the information you need to build a Turbo 5.3. I appreciate it. I'm installing it this weekend. Great. Just make sure ring gap, intercooling, good fuel, enough fuel, injectors and pump, and then it gets tuned properly. Yeah, the storm is not doing good things out there, man. Just got an 89 Dodge Caravan 2.5 turbo. Ooh, you got the big block 4-cylinder. And I have a 2.5 also that we're going to be running on the dyno as well. First car was an 86 Dodge Omni 2.2. Very cool. An AR500 eBay mini supercharger. I'm going to have to look that up. Because the other option is I was looking at even designing and building like a little roots or centrifugal blower. Yeah, that supercharger is probably way too big. We're looking at something that's only needs to flow like 1 or 2 horsepower. I don't even know. The problem is I don't even know I don't know if the Trail 90 even has enough power to drive that. Electric front wheel. I thought about stuff like that because everybody's riding these electric bikes around like they're getting exercise riding an electric bike that's doing all the work for them. But those kinds of things are also a possibility. Richard, I have a mini bike. I put a 302cc. That's a pretty big Harbor Freight motor on, milled head, and it goes. I took whipped cream nitrous refills, then in a trigger bike tire inflator and ran nitrous. Yeah, nitrous will definitely work. Added an adjustable carburetor and made it rich. This carburetor does have the altitude compensator enrichment circuit on it. Wyatt taking a break from hurricane cleanup. Yeah, I've seen some of the photos and videos and stuff back there. It's pretty bad. Hopefully you guys are all safe. Many people who do homebrew turbos on MGBs run Harley CV carburetors. There are bigger carburetors, even lawnmower carburetors. Getting enough fuel with a big enough carburetor would not be a problem if it's a draw through. Even if it's a blow through, it could be done. We just, like I said, need to pressurize the fuel system. Are all those record albums? No, those are all books. But we do have some vinyl because we have a record player downstairs. They're at 30 top, 25 second, and intercooled 72-pound injectors and 340 liter per hour pumps. Dude, you are all set. Michael, I'm sorry to hear, man. Hurricane cleanup. My work shed was flooded, so I had to find out which tools are still usable. Yeah. Scars is in the house. You're better off doing a big bore conversion and converting the electrics to a Boyer Branson set if it's available still. I tried to boost one back in the 90s when I worked for Honda. It blew up. Yeah, the electric stuff, Scott, on those bikes makes them heavy, but that's what makes you tough. Is a supercharger safer than a turbo or turbos? No, but the problem would be the thing I like about the electric turbo is it doesn't need to be on all the time. I could just push a button and have it spool up. The other thing that I like about sizing a turbo for a seven horsepower motor is going to be difficult to find something that's that small. Porsche smog pump. Yeah, the one I'm looking at is the modular Ford since we already have it. Australia's in the house. Wyatt, you're all safe, far enough away from the worst of it. Relatively minor stuff. A couple of big palms down, fences down. Cars made it through unscathed. I saw some of the cars were flipped over and all kinds of stuff. The one that they keep showing up on social media is the Superbirds. Well, one of those was, both of them were kind of beat up, but one of them was upside down. Can you mount two blowers on two M90s on a 350? Yeah, you just have to come up with a custom intake manifold. Normally, they make a pyramid shape and put them sideways. Carlove, you designed to do intake? Cool. That's good, Dan. That's what would make a 0.271. Yeah, the draw through, let's see, what's the difference between draw through and blow through? The draw through, the carburetor would be mounted in front of the turbo and it draws fuel through the turbo and then blows it into the engine. And then on a blow through, the turbo is mounted in front of the carburetor and then forces air through the carburetor. Both of them work. McLaren P1 end up flooded out of a garage and floating down the road. Yeah, there was a lot of storm surge or a lot of water flow. See, Michael, that's you got to look at the bright side. Project car was spared from the flooding because it was up on jack stands. There's no better atomization of one versus the other. The problem with draw through setups is that it makes it more difficult to run intercooling because trying to draw the fuel through and it has a really long path, so the signal is not quite as good, or the response is not quite as good. And then if you have to blow it through, or when you draw the fuel through the turbo or a blower and then have it go through an intercooler, a lot of that fuel hits against the walls of the intercooler and comes out of the suspension, and that can be problematic. How do you make more power with less boost? That's actually the video that I'm doing today on, because I got about 15 messages when Little John posted something about, made a comment about, an absolute proclamation about cylinder heads. And so everybody said, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I'm like, look, you know who it is. You know who the source is. Regardless of whether or not the statement was accurate, it's going to come as an absolute. And so I want to talk about, because there's not a just, it's always this way with porting. This particular comment was about porting cylinder heads, porting factory heads. And there's always way more to than you always do this or you always do that. It's not like that. There are times when you do that and times when you don't, and it's always the middle ground. They say the hurricane might bankrupt Florida's insurance industry. Yeah, it's bad. And I don't think it's done either. It's going through South Carolina or somewhere now, right? They make a 36-volt motor kit, 2 cordless drill batteries. Milwaukee has 12H batteries. That would be perfect. See, that would be kind of cool. And I like the Milwaukee idea because I've watched lots of the videos of, I particularly like the ones where they use those to power the propellers for their boats. I think that's pretty cool. Richard, are you going to the Rennsport reunion? No, that would be cool. Although my friend Bernie and I were talking about that when I was at the air races, that was one of the things that was kind of on our list that we'd like to do. Dan's a Porsche guy. He's going to be there. You don't want fuel in your turbo. Yeah, any sort of liquid. I feel the same way about that I do about water meth before the turbo. I know a lot of guys do it, but it's not good for the turbo. It's not good for the life of the turbo. Impellers don't like even hitting fuel at 100,000 or more RPM. Can you use any other straight six parts on a Chevy 250? Yeah, the 250 and the 230, I think, interchange a lot of stuff. The 292, I think, less so. It's true to build a nasty NA motor to get more power with less boost. The more power that your NA motor makes, the more power you'll make at any given boost level. You can use Chevy 292 rockers on a Ford 300. Wine Guy made a valve job video yesterday. He does good stuff over there. Richard, can you test some 997 variable turbos? Are those Porsche turbos? Because probably not. Those sound like they're $1 million a piece. Or an RDX boost flap. You can use big block Chevy rockers on an Iron Duke and also big block Ford rockers. Yeah, and a lot of guys interchange the big block Chevy and Ford stuff. V8 valves and valve springs work on 250s, 307 pistons fit in our flat tops. If you're fighting an NA sealing versus boost, why bother? Those are all things that I'm going to talk about in this video. There are times when and people want to argue back and forth about should you port heads, like, and particularly the LS thing is really the discussion, because on others it's more cut and dry. On a 5-liter Ford, you can run boost on a stock 5-liter Ford head, but I wouldn't, because I would definitely change those heads. I would go to the wrecking yard at the very least and get GT40 heads, because they would definitely be a step up. On an LS, you can go so far in the power on the LS that does it justify you changing them? And the answer to me is yes and no. There's not a wrong answer there. So everything to put a blower to build an all new parts 3800. You want to run a 3800 with a supercharger on it? We'd always run big block Chevy rockers on Cleveland's because they were cheaper and easier to find. Yeah. It's odd that there would be a price difference between those two things when they're essentially the same. Yeah, turbo 351, you just multiply it out. If you have a 650 horsepower motor and you run 14.7 pounds of boost, you double the power output, and then any percentage of 14.7, whatever the boost percent, whatever that 8 pounds is as a percentage of 14.7, you just multiply 650 times that number, and you get your theoretical power output. Timing gear on the head of the Trail 90 on the head crank venting are going to be a problem under boost. What about a 2-valve Ford like a 5.4? Yeah, you can run boost on that if that's your question. Do you have to do piston work to do a 302 to fit 180 AFR heads? No, a 185 head will fit depending on your camshaft. Patented power boost formula. That's right. In the 70s, we would use Pontiac valves on our small book Chevy heads, and they would get you 100 long valve. You could cut them to the diameter you wanted. Yeah, because the Pontiac valves were bigger. Yeah, the Ford Tax. Yeah, it's not anywhere near like a Porsche Tax because that's pretty steep. If you're building a 3800 to do a turbo on, what we're doing is a ported heads, obviously, some sort of camshaft that's going to help it make more NA power, and then we're going to run the intake manifold is more one of convenience than anything. If I was building the motor for something that I was going to drive around and I was not trying to specifically do the big bang, I would do ported head, a cam, and one of the NA intake manifolds, and then run boost through that. Is porting LS heads necessary on a 5.4 on boost? Is porting heads necessary? It's not necessary. That nothing that you do is necessary. It's just that you get better gains from it. And a 5.4, if it's a 4 valve, I probably wouldn't port the heads. If it's a 5.4 2 valve, you would definitely get gains from the 2 valve. Will AFR 185 slow enough to make 500 horsepower? Yes, very easily. 9.5 to 1 compression, 218, 224. You won't make 500 horsepower with a 218 camshaft though. In a 408 maybe. Yeah, that's still kind of small. Karlov, going for another personal best. Let us know tonight how it runs, and put some tires on that, and you'll get a personal best. Put something better than the Sears Best Metric All Season Radials. My thought was to run an M90. If you're going to run an M90, make sure to run the Gen 5 one. Put as big a throttle body and entry as you can into it. Obviously, you speed the blower up. I can do some heads and digitize it, but handling porting all heads is, yeah, that would be hard. That is a lot of work. Can't imagine grinding on cylinder heads for a week. Yeah, that, especially an iron head, that does not sound like fun. Although I did port one intake and one exhaust and one chamber on the 3800 heads, and for what I did, it didn't take very long. But if you're good at it and you're going to do it right, it takes a lot longer. For the 3800, I think the aluminum NA intake is slightly better than the polymer one. If you take a look at the video that Richard did, you can see which one of those is better. We use MAP and TPS rate of change to drop ignition time and momentarily as a tack for anti-lag. Have you tried to do that? No, because I've never done anti-lag on the engine dyno. The end goal is a twin turbo, the 3800. What power? Well, the power output is going to be determined by the turbos that you use. Yeah, Dan, Ironhead's not good. I did Merlin heads back in the day. Just lifting Merlin heads up doesn't really sound like a good idea. Let's see how our poll is doing. Is boost a better idea than a hybrid drive for the Trail 90 power adder? 64% are choosing boost and 36% are thinking electric. The real secret to porting is to only remove material from areas that increase flow. And the real secret there is knowing what areas those are. Have you ever tested the Barry Cooks turbo from VS Racing? I don't even know what that is. Is that somebody's name? You made it to a live broadcast, and it's a morning one. Scars, I don't know how much power you're trying to get. Are you trying to get all of it? And I don't know what right now, I don't know what the internal strength is of the short block on that motor. We don't know because I haven't done the big bang yet. So I don't know what it'll take. I'm thinking it might get to 1,000 horsepower. And so you would need turbos to support that if you're trying to do that. Or if you're only wanting to run it and have it not break and you want to run 600 or 700 horsepower, which I think guys are doing that pretty regularly, then that shouldn't be a problem. But two 3076s is what we'll probably initially try. We may go to two 3582s for the big bang. In fact, we probably will do 3582s on the big bang motor because we're starting off with something that if we do twins, if we do a single, we'll start off with a GT45 and then go up to a 7875 or something. That's true. A dyno run is quite short. A dyno run is actually longer than a quarter-mile drag strip usually is. Because at 300 RPM per second, if we do a 3,000 RPM spread, that's 10 seconds. And actually the load and unload portion of it is longer than that. When building an engine, the first thing I need to do is figure out how much air I need to pump through the engine to make horsepower goals and then decide what I need components to get it. The first thing you should do is decide on how much power you want to make. And then you decide what motor you're using. Am I using an LS or a small block, a big block, a 4200, a B16 Honda? And then you decide what you're going to do to the NA power to get the NA power at some level that's going to help you get whatever this other power is. Sometimes in that process, you're like, all I have to do is add 7 pounds to the thing that I already have, and I'm already making more power than I need. And then it just goes from there. Okay, I want 1,000 horsepower. Okay, now to make 1,000 horsepower, what do I need to do to this? And then you go through all of the decision process. Let's see. Barry Cooks turbo 78.9, 78 dual ball bearing T4. I have two VS Racing turbos. One of them is the 7875 Gen 2. The other one is some kind of big thing that I haven't run yet. If I only ported the valve side of the head. Are you talking about the bowl or are you talking about the chamber? So you got to tell me which one of those it is. For 11-second S10, should I go big block or small block? Easier and cheaper to run 11s. Either of those will work. I think with a big block, if you went and got a junkyard Gen 6, put a cam and springs in it, and then put a 125 horsepower shot on it, that'd easy go 11s in an S10. Have you done a big bang on a 2300 Ford? I've never run a 2300 Ford on the engine dyno. I've done a lot of it on the chassis dyno, but not on the engine dyno. Yeah, Dan, most of the porting work should be done in the bowl area. I just didn't know what his question was. I didn't know if he's talking about unshrouding the valve on that side or doing bowl work on the other side. Should try HE351VE whole set with a mechanical VGT actuator conversion on a V8 or 4-cylinder. 4G63 guys are running them combined with an external gate. What are those from, or is that just an aftermarket turbo? Is that something from a diesel application? An Audi 3-liter turbo would be a good project. Your dyno pulls are longer than a quarter mile. Yeah, the time that it takes to run them, and in fact, they could be quite a bit longer. Sometimes, depending on what your sweep is. If you go from 2,500 to 7,500 or something like that, it could be obviously a lot longer than it takes. The thing is that it's not simulating a dyno or a quarter mile run because you're not going through gears. You can do that, but that's not what we're doing on the engine dyno. Big block is a tight squeeze in S10. Yeah, and they're probably kits for small blocks, right? And you could do the same thing with a small block. You just have to change the gearing on it. If you went and got, I mean, an LS would make life a lot easier, but you could do it with a small block or a big block. Will the stock Gen 6 big block Chevy pistons hold a handful of passes on a 125 shot? Are the rods sturdy enough? They'll take endless amounts of 125 horsepower shots. Endless. We've run turbos on them and run 70 or 80 poles at 700 or 800 horsepower. So that's not a problem at all. Boosting the Trail 90 would make sense if you can find an efficient turbo or supercharger for it. It's very hard to find. We have an electric supercharger, so that getting the airflow to it, I don't think is the problem. The fuel system and timing, and people were mentioning other vacuum areas or something that were problematic. I saw a cheap supercharger for a motorcycle. I thought of putting on my John Deere. Simulating gear changes seems like it would be a necessary load on the dyno. You don't, I mean, they have dynos that will do that, and they obviously have chassis dynos that will do that also, but that's a different thing than testing the thing for power. You're doing a different test if you're doing that. I see one veteran authority. You can say David Vizard. It's okay. I know David. He's good people. Recommending an LSA of 103. The first thing I would say is there's no absolute LSA number. That's not right. And the other thing is the tightening the LSA up, irrespective of the other valve events, the one thing that does is it tends to destroy street manners. The idle quality goes away, and low speed drivability gets hurt also. It can enhance power production through a lot of the curve. We see that all the time. It's just that as you tighten that LSA up, the idle quality definitely goes away, and that's why you don't see it a lot on any of the factory stuff. Porsche has a 3-axis dyno to simulate engines running. Yeah, all of the race car, Ferrari and McLaren and all those guys have, and even OEs have not just engine dynos, but drivetrain dynos, so that they can simulate all of the things that happen out on the street or on a track in this case. Live from Fort Myers, Florida. I hope you're okay. I can say I've been in the eye of a hurricane and my cars all made it. No damage. Yeah, not a good feeling waiting for stuff to get wiped out in slow motion. Dinky electric blower require an electric fuel system upgrade. It would. Most of these are run on 12 volts. I don't know if I can find a 6-volt blower. We'd have to see. Daniel, it's my understanding that Big Boss Chevy roller rockers have a slightly different geometry than the ones on the Fords, and that swapping them isn't recommended. It does work. Sometimes you have to change the push rod length, but it works, and it's been done for years and years and years. There are big bore kits for the Trail 90s. I came here only because the end of the month screen avatar for your video is upside down. Yeah, I know that happens. I have to send that video to myself and then send it back and all of that stuff. Proof Richard loves Neanderthals from Antipods. Actually, I just read a thing that said we are all descendants of sharks. So I'd like to think that I have shark blood. That's even better than tiger blood. They're building around me. I pretty much lost everything, so I'm lucky the aluminum gods are watching over. It's weird that stuff happens with these big storms. You see that with tornadoes too. They're just like going through, cutting a path. They just go, oh, I'm going to go around this guy. We like that guy. I'm going to keep going. And it really is, when you look at the paths from above, it's like that's definitely the hand of God. And he said, oh, this farmhouse is cool. Nope, we're taking this one out. And and if it's a trailer park, it's just a free for all. That's why sharks don't bite lawyers. $400 horsepower and a 3,000-pound vehicle will theoretically do 1150s. It's gotta have to hook pretty good for that, but yeah, it doesn't really take very much. And the thing about it is, if you have a 400 horsepower is really easy to get, even with a small block. So if you go to the wrecking yard and you want to do a Chevy, get an L31, put a dual plane and a carburetor on it. I would put a cam in it, small spring, because it's got a Vortec head. Put a 125 horse plate shot on it, and it's good things are going to happen. Yeah, hurricanes are not good. We went through Hurricane Irene when we were in the Bahamas when we were on vacation years back, and it was it was blowing pretty good. The big bore kits are great. I'm running a big bore 90 on a CRF 50. It's around 110. Nice. You put a Hayabusa engine on the Trail 90? That'd be pretty sporty, right? It'd definitely get up the hills that way, right? What's the deal with the eliminators on the Gen 6? Right now they have spring rotators. And so what most people do is, and this is what we did, is get rid of them. And then you put rotator eliminators on them, which are basically just thick spring seats that are about the thickness of the rotator eliminators. Honestly, I wish, and this is something I was thinking about selling to make all the money in the world, to make $20. They need to do these rotator eliminators in different thicknesses. And I was just thinking about making stackable ones so that then they would, interchange or insert into each other, because a 300,000th rotator eliminator, they all don't need to be that thick. If they were different thicknesses, it would allow us more spring possibilities. Porsche smog pump can put up 17 psi. 17 psi at what flow rate though? The thing is that for what I'm trying to do, an aquarium pump will almost feed this trail 90. Yeah, and if it's a part for a Porsche, I already can't afford it. I can't even afford the Porsche books that I have. It's cool and sad that a new minivan can run a quarter-mile time compared to the most 80s or 90s sports cars. That's the thing. If you go get in a Honda Accord and run it versus a Ferrari like a 308, I think it would work a Ferrari over pretty good. You don't need different thickness retainers. Not retainers. These are spring seats. I run an unpopular small twin cam track car. What is that? You just got to tell us what it is, because it's probably popular here. You're among friends. Stock cams, and there's no head options. Well, you could obviously port the head, so that's one option. I've had some success with anti-reversion chambers on the headers. When you say I've had success, what do you mean by that? Do you have dyno results on that tells us that works? And why do you want anti-reversion on your headers? Oh, well, I want somebody to explain that to me, because there are what are essentially reverse reflected waves, that scavenging that you actually want to have happen. And I'm of the opinion that anti-reversion cones that they were popular back in the day actually stop that reflected wave or dampen it. And I don't think that that's a good idea. Running 11s in a S10 is pretty easy. Yeah, they don't weigh very much. Nitrous is the cheapest way to add power, but I don't want to add 1 horsepower worth of nitrous to a Trail 90. I would rather have it be, ideally, I'd rather have it be electric, whether that's a supercharger or a electric motor. I rode in a 308. I rode in one of those too when I was out at the Silver State. I talked to a guy who was really cool, and he was asking me about the Mustang and stuff, because he was thinking about buying one. Because when you have a 308, you could buy other cars too. And so he said, "Yeah, I'll come take you for riding it. Come on, let's go." So that was my first ride in a 308. I've always liked those cars. They're actually one of my favorite Ferraris. I've always liked the way that they looked, and I like the way that they looked better. The 328 was not bad, but the 348 and stuff in the Mondial and all of those of that period were not good. The 355 I liked, and then the 430 I liked also. What was the next one? A 458. I raced in Midnight Madness in San Antonio, Texas. I have an RB25. I have one of those that we're trying to put on the engine dyno. So let's take a look at our, is boost a better idea than the hybrid drive for the Trail 90? 65% are saying yes. We're going to close out that poll. What's up with my red pickup? It runs good. It has a new remanufactured transmission in it, and so the transmission is working good. The 88 Ferrari GTO was another very cool. Bob, I was out at Fort Stockton for a road and track top speed shootout with my Mustang, and Bob Norwood had a GTO bodied crazy thing with a twin turbo big block Chevy in it. Dan, that's actually what I was thinking of. That was my first thought, was some sort of starter. I didn't know if a different kind of electric motor would do it easier than a starter. I was thinking about the engagement in the starter, and then obviously I could put the sprocket drive on it. But then I was worried about the engagement of it. I think I would want it just to be in one position, to be always freewheeling, and then I was worried about that, and so all of these things. What are you going to do the RB for the oiling issue? They don't have an oiling issue. They run fine from the factory. That's a myth. It's the same thing as the Cleveland oiling myth, or the 400M oiling myth, or the Buick oiling myth. Saab once claimed the 5-speed Saab 9000 Aero will streak to 50 from 50 to 75 miles an hour faster than a Ferrari Testarossa or a Porsche Carrera 4. That sort of oddly specific acceleration test is somebody finding out that the gearing was bad in one of these other cars. So it's in an area where it didn't accelerate especially well for that test. Or maybe that those other cars were doing it in 5th gear and they were doing it in an optimized gear. Dave, how does something show nothing on the dyno, but show something in the real world? I don't understand how, if something is worthwhile, how is it not then measurable? Bendix drive and a push button on the handlebars. That's what I want. That's the ideal thing, Dan, is I want to push the pass thing. I want the engagement, whether it's an electronic supercharger or some sort of electric drive. I want it to be not on all the time, and I want to engage it, like like you engage the hyperdrive. Bakuni carb on a 90 usually yields some good gains. The other thing I was thinking about is I was looking at the intake design and I was thinking about maybe trying to make that longer. yeah, Scott, exactly. Because we do not pull the engines below peak torque. I always run the motors below peak torque. Do not pull the engines below peak torque, but on the track they have to restart from below 3,000. We run stuff below 3,000 all the time. Turbo boost kit, yep. You could do a 6-volt starter generator off an old lawnmower. They have lots of power and torque. Keyed shaft drive. Wonder how much power one of these 18 or 24 volt Milwaukee things could do on just a drill. A drill with a sprocket on it. That'll be interesting. Yeah, Alex, or Alexis, will the gravity fuel feed on the Trail 90 be pushed back from the air pushing the blower? Yes, it will. That we talked about that earlier. That was one of the, when I first went into all of this, that was one of the things that would have to be overcome, is you'd have to have a pressurized fuel system. Carry a spare drill battery. That's the thing. It wouldn't be used very often. It would be, I have a few hills that I go up and down, and so it'd be nice to, like, be able to get in it. Scuba tank, yeah. It's going to take some experimenting. Small leaf blower. Getting the boost to the motor is not a problem. We're going to use an electric smog pump for that. That's easy. That's the easy part. And then run a big intercooler sitting off to the side in the airflow. What the anti-reversion header did was make the engine respond faster from low RPM on a direct drive race car. Yeah, Dave, I don't doubt that that's the case. My question is, then if it does do that, it has to be adding power. If it responds better, that's a change in power. That's a change in the power curve. So that has to be measurable. Oh, well, the people are mentioning smog pumps. We have a smog pump already. That getting boost to the thing is not the problem. We got to go past that. We're there already. We have that. The issue now is fuel flow and timing and any other issue that we might have with wherever the boost is going. Would it be too detrimental to top speed with more aggressive gear ratio? The Trail 90 has a essentially an 8-speed transmission because it has a drop gear in it. So we have steeper gearing if I want to use that already, but that's not what I want. I want more power. You never pull the engine below peak torque on the dyno. We run from 2,000 to 6,500 all the time. We don't start at the peak torque. We don't start past the peak torque, because then you'd be running an RPM that's only like 1,000 or 1,500 RPM wide. That doesn't really tell you anything. It certainly doesn't tell us anything for the more street-oriented motors. So we do a sweep from 2,000 to 6,500 or so, something like that, so that we can see what's happening where the torque peak happens, and then what happens past the torque peak out to the horsepower peak. I think you'd want a motor that can double as generator, recharge the battery. Well, we already have an alternator that charges the battery that's there, so that's not a problem. Two more minutes. The old Vista Cruiser. Yeah, those are good. The alternator is going to be small because it's designed to do what it's doing right now with the system that it has, but it would still allow me to do a 5 or 10 second, pull, as it were, on an electric supercharger on a smog pump. It allow me to activate a smog pump for that short period of time and then recharge up. It's not going to be running all the time, and that's the beauty of having a push button thing. And so the electrical system and the current alternator would definitely work. The problem that it has is that it's only a 6-volt. It would need to be a 12-volt system. And then I'm thinking, now I have the package tray back there, the little rack. So now I got to have a 12-volt battery back there. Then now I got a bunch of extra weight and stuff. Richard, are you interested in doing a SAW B2234R? I'm not even sure I know what that is. Might be easier to tune with fuel injection. Well, the other thing we were thinking about is like supplying the extra fuel through like a pressurized, kind of a nitrous setup. Or the other thing that I was thinking about is a a water meth injection setup. And though, so we could, but the thing is, the amount of extra fuel that we have to supply to this, or fuel that we'd have to supply to this under boost, because we could really do, if I got it right, we could do all the fueling under boost with this pressurized system, like with the water meth, if we could get it right. But it would be a little bit of work. And has it been 2 minutes? I think it has. We could do a draw through, fascist, but I don't think that a draw through will work on the electric supercharger. I don't think it's sealed well enough, and I'd be worried about fuel getting into an electric motor. That's usually not a good situation. Run boost. The fuel tanks are under boost. It's 1-to-1, but you still have the problem of no fuel flow, because if you have the same pressure, I don't think it's going to gravity feed like that. You need to have a little bit more pressure in the fuel system. And if we have a little bit more pressure in the fuel system, like 1 pound or something more, then we could also have fuel enrichment if that happens. It's a Saab 9000 Aero and later Saab motor. Yeah, there's lots and lots of motors that I want to do, but the problem is it's a lot of times a time-consuming logistic nightmare to get everything hooked up and running on the dyno. Once it's running, doing things on the dyno is fairly easy, but it can take weeks or months to get stuff hooked up on the dyno. The little Yamaha Raptors run a small intake pump and a single injector on the intake. See, I could do a fuel system for it. I'm wanting to stay away from that, given how little amount of fuel that we have to supply to this thing. All right, Michael, hurricane cleanup. Yeah, there's got to be a simple way. That's why I'm here. That's why we're talking about this. And on that note, it's time to get going. So here, I want you guys to think about this. How is Richard going to do that? How is Richard going to supply fuel? I'm just going to try some things and then fail, and then eventually succeed, because that's how we do this. That's the scientific method. We try and fail, and we try and fail, and pretty soon we've tried enough stuff, and then you succeed. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'm going to go do a video now on cylinder heads on turbo LS motors and why you need them or why you don't need them. And then we'll be back on tonight. Thank you guys all for showing up. And hopefully all of my friends out in Florida are cleaning up and everybody's safe, man. My thoughts and prayers are out there for you guys. See you.